A group of European politicians and former military officials have proposed deploying 120 fighter jets over western Ukraine as part of the SkyShield initiative to protect against Russian shelling during a possible ceasefire. The jets would be based in Poland, Romania and the Czech Republic, and would patrol areas where there is no active fighting, including the Kyiv and Odessa regions. The project would use NATO infrastructure and command structures, but is not formally an alliance initiative. In an interview with Glavred, aviation expert and former test engineer at the Antonov Design Bureau of Ukraine Konstantin Krivolap spoke about whether European aircraft are capable of defending Ukraine from Russian air attacks, whether Ukrainian air defense is sufficient to protect the front from the Russian Federation, and whether EU aircraft will be able to shoot down Russian aircraft in the event of provocations by the Kremlin. He said that this idea is not new. It was developed by specialists of the Royal Air Force of Great Britain from the first days of the hot phase. These were specialists who were engaged in planning operations, risk assessment, identification of possible threats and so on. From the point of view of technology, logistics and other aspects, this concept is polished, it has no illogical or critical gaps, he added. According to him, calculations by experts show that it is advisable to use airplanes to provide air defense of the skies from cruise missiles and Shaheeds. They do not pay any attention to smaller drones, believing that this is not their task. Cruise missiles can shoot down the aircraft that will be involved in this operation, Rafale, Eurofighter, and possibly F-16, Mirage, depending on which countries and which parts of their air forces will be involved in the process. All of them will operate according to NATO standards. In total, it is expected that 120 aircraft will be involved. At the same time, it should be clearly understood that these aircraft cannot operate against ballistic missiles. There are no aircraft in the world that can operate against ballistic missiles. In order to avoid risks for pilots and aircraft, it was taken into account that Russian fighters do not approach the territory controlled by our forces at a distance of less than 30 to 40 kilometers. Accordingly, it was decided that the mission's aircraft will not approach closer than 200 kilometers to the border with Russia or the line of combat contact. These are all western regions of Ukraine, and partly the central part, he added. Expert says that thus, the patrol zone will cover the western regions of Ukraine, partly the central regions, where constant combat duty of partner aircraft will be possible. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's cousin Nate has been fighting for Ukraine as part of the 108th Separate Mechanized Brigade, Da Vinci Wolves, since 2022. In March, he came to Lviv and wanted to help in some way. One day at the hotel, Nate meets a British volunteer who was looking for people with military experience. They took anyone who had ever held a gun. The training was very basic, he says. A few weeks later, when a group of Ukrainian volunteers invited him to go to the front with them, he agreed, Le Figaro writes. The man reportedly had military experience, having served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 4 years. Since then, he returned to the U.S. for only a few weeks, and in June 2022, he went back to Ukraine to fight in the Donbass, where there was fierce fighting. Only in January 2025 did he return to the U.S. When Nate heard his cousin J.D. Vance attack Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office of the White House, he was furious. He was deeply disappointed. J.D. is a good man, smart. When he criticized aid to Ukraine, I thought it was just a political game, that he was trying to please a certain electorate. But what they did with Zelensky with US President Donald Trump was an ambush, saturated with absolute hypocrisy, he emphasizes. Nate and JD are cousins. The vice president's mother, Beverly, is the sister of Nate's father, James. I was disappointed. When JD justified his distrust of Zelensky with the stories he had seen, it took my breath away. His own cousin was on the front lines. I could have told him the truth, without embellishment, without personal gain. But he never tried to find out more, Nate notes. At the same time, the man himself tried to contact his cousin, but there was no response. He considers the US, Putin's useful idiots, calling Trump and Vance's attempts to negotiate with the Kremlin dictator a mistake. Media reported earlier that Vance had become the main antagonist in Trump's negotiations with Ukraine. European officials familiar with the progress of Ukraine-US negotiations on the agreement on valuable minerals noted that Vance often took a tougher position on this issue than Trump. In addition, Trump and Vance can destroy the world order, which will be used by Russia and China. These two people are sure that Russia is not a threat. They also believe that the United States should leave NATO and seize Greenland one way or another. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen held a press conference to mark the 100 days of her second term at the head of the European Commission and to outline her priorities for the coming months. According to Associated Press, she addressed security and the current alliance with the United States. The tasking of the European Council was very clear that we deliver on the National Escape Clause and that we deliver on the proposal with the new instrument, with €150 billion in loans, for joint procurement. We are looking into the topic of cohesion funds, as you know, and to deliver on the private sector, the savings and investment union and a different lending pattern of the EIB, said the president. The United States, they have been for more than 80 years our closest ally. And in the face of adversity, the US and Europe have always been stronger together. And yes, there are differences. But, we might have different views on some topics. But if you look at the common interest that we have, they always outweigh our differences. So I think it's important that we work together. We will have our differences, we have to sort them out, but we will have to find common avenues. Regarding Ukraine, von der Leyen announced they will have to step up their support. We have made sure that the financing gap for the economic survival of Ukraine is closed in 2025. Focusing on this year. And indeed, I mean, if you look at what the European Union delivered overall, it's €140 billion. And this includes the economic survival or stability of Ukraine, in the year 2025, she explained. Military equipment have been supplied to Ukraine, actually on par with the United States, here. We will have to step up without any question. Finally, von der Leyen reassured that there will be no need to de-risk relations with the US.